inconsistencies. I've got a thing or two to say to you. Hello, my name is Robert Pembroke. I'd like to give you my 9/11 personal testimony for the 11th of September 2001 when the explosions took place at the World Trade Center in New York, in Manhattan. So this is my, this is my 9/11 personal testimony about what occurred that day on September 11 in New York City, the World Trade Center, specifically Tower number 5. I've previously explained to you in parts 1 to 4 how we used an auditing method to evaluate the efficacy of the shot firer plan in relation to the deployment of ordnance for the building explosions on 9/11. That's the 11th of September 2001. Now I'd like to describe to you a brief mud map of how we approached the deployment of ordnance for the building explosions on 9/11. This classical pancake effect that you saw, no doubt on the news coverage, excellent news coverage, wasn't it? It's really good, eh? Yeah? Yeah. I'd like you to think of that explosion that day as a watershed in the history of the World Trade Center. When the buildings were being surveyed for suitability for destruction after the terrorist attacks in the car park, I believe it was 1993-92 if I recall, there was a lot of concern that the demolition that we were about to do couldn't be confined to World Trade Centers 1 tower and 2 tower, and that most of the buildings proximal had significant foundation damage and would have to be demolished. It was a big job, no two ways about it. The demolition company contractors were sent to all the buildings earmarked for demolition, and chalk marks were made where plasma and concrete cutters were used to cut quite oblique incisions into the concrete pillars surrounding the elevator shafts and elsewhere when rigidity signalled too much resistance. A large number of acute angles were cut into the concrete to assist the effects of gravity on the vertical descent of the building floors. Yeah. The locus of these cuts could not be too shallow nor too steep. So if you look at the diagram here, you'll see a contrast between a cut that in a pylon, specifically near the elevators actually, where if it's too steep, everything drops too quickly. If it's too shallow, then things don't fall quite the right way. So there's a bit of an art form to it. There's a Goldilocks zone when it comes to the incision or cutting angle of inclination needed to weaken the concrete and alloys in the buildings to provide that, you know, it's like a shallow cereal bowl effect within implosions, and that's what you're aiming for. I'll just show you a diagram here. It's a bit like, it's like an ellipse in the building on the floor. Yeah, it tends to buckle inwards there. The idea was to control the directionality of the debris into a precise zone by weakening the structure of the building to limit the directionality of building movement once the charges had detonated. There were 3 outcomes in relation to the target zone I just mentioned. Firstly, the goal was to limit the size of the target zone for the implosion so that clean-up crews could simply bring in the equipment to retrieve the debris without having to work in a large area. Secondly, the process had to be efficacious. It saves money and time when one wishes to be timely and prudent in the interests of brevity. if the work site is of a limited size. And thirdly, everyone likes the money, but they don't like to spend too much to get it. So limiting the size of the work site allowed the demolition crews to properly target their own resources in the days to follow. So if you look at the diagram, you'll see that if you get it coming down all in one big heap, you have a smaller target zone. So you see the square box, smaller target zone. But if it laid over horizontally, then there's a lot more area that you have to work with, yeah? A lot more mistakes could happen. Okay, so if you look at the diagram adjacent, you can see that it makes more sense to encourage the vertical downward directionality of debris into a small heap rather than it fall like a tree from a vertical position to a horizontal position where it will just splay everywhere. The perimeter of the area of concern is less in the former, in the confined target zone, than in the latter, the one that's all spread out everywhere. You only have to look at, say, a tree when it falls to see that it takes up a lot of space horizontally when it has fallen. Conversely, a stump takes up less area. It's smaller, yeah, the area. In the past, structural weaknesses had creeped up on buildings in New York City, like, let me see, the Empire State Building. Wonderful building, isn't it? And this happened during World War II, when a B-29 did indeed crash into that old icon in New York City. Of course, it was the film set for, I believe it was King Kong, wasn't it? And that was, I think that, did that star, I think it starred, was it Vivian Leigh or Faye Dunaway or something? I can't recall. Anyway, they actually had to decide the cost effectiveness of removing the building shortly after the making of King Kong, believe it or not. It was actually a very sturdy building and had the wrong materials composition for demolition. Even so, there was a big protest at Tiffany's at a time during the parade outside Macy's department store, when engineers stated most unceremoniously that they wanted to demolish the Empire State Building. In fact, I think it was the auteur Truman Capote who felt his belly was like raw hamburger mince when he found out about their intentions. And he couldn't keep down his oatmeal at Tiffany's, where he got in an argument with the waiter as a consequence. I think they have like a meal or a restaurant area, don't they, and a gift store area. It's lovely, wasn't it? Tiffany's had a great sort of atmosphere. The waiter, as a consequence of this argument he had with Mr Capote, he quit his job in protest and ended up, believe it or not, going to law school. He became a lawyer, went to court one day where he would defend a man whom you may know of as Kris Kringle, aka Santa Claus. This poor fellow, Mr Kringle, had to prove to all and sundry that he was, in fact, Santa Claus, especially the people at Macy's department store where he worked. Now I'd like to sing for you a reworking of the song Carey, originally by Joni Mitchell. I think she did it or composed it in 1971. It appears in her album Blue. It's a wonderful album, I really like that album. I thought though I'd rework it, put my stamp on it, and I'd call it Clarice. Okay, so anyway, I'll give you that song now. What's that? Oh, okay. I'll see you later, eh? Thanks very much, bye. Hello, Robert Pembroke, Joni Mitchell tune, Carey reworked into the tune Clarice. wind is out of Africa. Last night I couldn't get to sleep. Oh, you know it sure is hard to leave here, Clarice, but it's really not my home. My fingernails are filthy, I got a beach tar on my feet, and I miss my clean white linen and my fancy French cologne. Oh, Clarice, get out your keys, and I'll put on some silver. Oh, you're nasty, Clarice. Woo! But I like you. Come on down to the Mermaid Cafe and I will buy you a bottle of wine. And we'll laugh and toast to nothing and smash our empty glasses down. Let's have a round for these freaks and these soldiers, a round for these friends of mine. Let's have another round for that bright red devil that keeps me up in this tourist hut. Come on, Gary, get out your keys. I'll put on some silver. Oh, you're nasty, Clarice. Woo! But I like you. Woo! Maybe I'll go to Amsterdam, or maybe I'll go to Rome, and rent me a grand Ottovino, and put some flowers round my room. But let's not talk about Valley Wells now. The night is a starry dome, and they're playing that scratchy rock and roll music, you know, the record stuff, beneath the macular moon. Carrie, get out your keys, and I'll put on some silver. Oh, you're nasty, Clarice. Woo! But I like her. You like her? She's good, isn't she? Woo! The wind is out of Africa. Last night I couldn't get to sleep. Oh, you know it sure is hard to leave here, but it's really not my home. Or maybe it's been too long a time since I was scrambling down the street. Now they got me used to that clean white linen and that fancy French cologne. Oh, Clarice, get out your key. I'll put on my finest silver. Go to the Mermaid Cafe, have fun tonight. I said, you're nasty, Clarice. Woo. But I like you. You're out of sight, isn't she, eh? Thanks very much, Robert Pembroke. Kerry reworked into Clarice. See you later.